So, thank you all very much for coming. As exam times are coming up, students get a lot of stress, and with this comes external pressures, tensions, and a lot of thoughts about the future, which at a young age is really hard to handle. So today we have two wonderful guests, Mr. Keith Layman and Dr. Michelle Goddard, who will give us a bit of insight about what really goes on in the brain and how can you cope with these things. So, Miss, would you like to start us off?
So I can just tell you about myself a little bit.
Yep.
So I'm Dr. Michelle Goddard, and I am a clinical psychologist from the United States. And so I have worked with youth and adolescents for many years in many different settings, but now I'm working at an international school and I'm helping students with all kinds of different issues. So it's something new and different every day, but what comes around this time of year is exam stress, exam preparation, trying to kind of cope with time management and things like that. So that's a common topic.
So a lot of stress for you. And sir, what about you?
I'm Keith Layman. I've been working in education since 1995, first as a French and Spanish teacher, but since 2000 I retrained as a school counselor, and so for the last 25 years now I've been working with young people in high schools. My current role is as career and higher education counselor, so I'm mostly working with students who are applying to colleges, and of course when it comes to exams and stress and pressures, that's often connected with their aspirations and what they want to do in the future, and all the worries that come along with, will I achieve what I need to achieve in order to get into the college or school that I'm targeting for admission.
And aside from, of course, the work that you've done to get here and to learn how to be a counselor and a psychiatrist, what would you say you bring to the table yourself in terms of connecting with students or being able to understand them better?
So for me, I'm a psychologist, and so I think, part of the connection is just, remembering kind of what I went through myself, so I have some empathy for going through, particularly with exam periods, kind of going through it myself. And then I have my own two teenagers. I'm a mom, and so I've witnessed my son going through high school and everything that happened when he was studying, and so I think that's part of the connection. But then I also I come from what's called a scientist practitioner model. And so that means that I really do look at evidence and research, and I look to see what the research says about stress and anxiety and symptoms of depression, and then I try to understand that as a practitioner, and I try to understand how I can help best and what I can do to use evidence-based sort of strategies to help students. So I have, I think, multiple perspectives.
Yeah, and I think for me it's just a lot of experience. I mean, I've been here for quite a while now. This is like my 16th graduation class, so I've kind of seen a lot. I've been at the same place for so long that I have an understanding of what kids are going through, what they're experiencing, how that connects with all the other parts of, their mental health, with their family concerns with their friends. I mean, I've pretty much seen it all, and I think in a sense having that kind of experience also allows me to be more reassuring. It allows me to kind of put things in perspective more so than what a teenager might be able to do, who might only be thinking in their context, or a much smaller kind of lens, through a much smaller lens. I have a much bigger lens through which I can help them assess and revise. Is this really true what you're thinking about? Is this really, the case for how it's what's actually happening for you right now? Can we, kind of broaden that picture a little bit and get a little bit more perspective?
So as you mentioned as well, that both of you have seen that over the years, this time, especially near the mocks and the finals, people tend to get a bit more stressed and more pressurized, right? And in these times, students can often get overwhelmed. They can often feel like no matter how much they do, it's never enough. So from your experiences, why do you feel like students feel that way? Like if I don't find success in this, then it's nothing, it's just the end. And would you say it's actually normal to feel that way?
Well, so what I think is that one of the reasons that teenagers might feel that way is because their brains are really still developing, and their brains develop all the way up until the age of 25. So they might kind of, like Mr. Layman was saying, might really feel like that, this is it, and like this is all or nothing, and there's no other possibility, and they don't have that perspective of, in the future, well, even if I fail, it's actually okay, and that's a learning experience. And there are still possibilities for how I can still be successful, and that success isn't this like kind of straight curve upwards. It's really can be like a hill and like many dips and valleys. So I think it's just about perspective and brain development. And so I think one of the important things is that really helping teenagers to know that stress can actually be kind of a good thing. It can be something that can be motivating, and it can be something that when you get through it, you actually learn from it. And even if you have a couple of failures along the way, which we all do, that's actually something that can help you make you successful in the future. And so kind of reframing it, kind of twisting it, that it can be okay to fail sometimes, and failure can help us to be successful.
Yeah, and if you're stressed about it, that means it's important to you, right? Like it's something that's meaningful. It's something that you're putting your effort into because it's valuable and there's a purpose for it. And I think one of the big things I try to remind students when it comes to mock exam time is to keep it in perspective. Like, what are these mock exams really worth? At our school, the mock exams, they can count towards your report card. They can count towards the end of your grade for your high school diploma. But along with all of the other work you've done up until that point throughout the school year. So it's not as if these mock exams are going to define everything that you do in high school. It's just not that intention, at least at our school. And in terms of the mock exams, they come at a time where kids will get feedback, and they'll be able to use that feedback for their actual exams, which do count. Their actual exams where they are going to get that official result from the IBO, and they're going to get that 1 through 7, and that's going to give them that time to practice and review and prepare, to identify like what's missing from my review plan. What do I need to do better on? Where can I fill in the gaps? So trying to remind them that mock exam period is valuable, not simply because you're going to get a number out of it at the end of it, but what it can help you teach and what it can help you learn, and how it can help you prepare actually for the actual exams that are coming.
So as you mentioned as well, so like you said, our brains are still developing and we're still trying to get a grasp of understanding stress, right? Now with this sort of developing brain comes the type of people that don't really take that stress seriously. Of course, there's the high achievers, and then there's normal students, and then there's perhaps some that don't necessarily care or don't have the thing switched on in their brain, like, okay, this is serious, I need to lock in. So what would you say is the stress compared to the high achievers to those students who are really sort of just getting by?
Well, sometimes I think about really what is the definition of success, and it for each person is an individual definition. And so some people might really, really want to be making, some high score, and they want to take rigorous classes, and they want to go to university, and that's okay, and that's one definition of success. But then other people, maybe a definition of success is more about happiness in life and enjoying the moment, and that's okay too. And so I think teenagers are trying to figure out that definition of success and how, what that means for them, and that's okay. And so everyone doesn't have to, aim for 40 plus. I mean, maybe it's a different definition for them, or maybe not doing full IB is an okay thing, not having the DP. So that doesn't mean it's failure. That means it's just you have a different set of values, and your set of values is completely, I think completely valid, and it's up to each individual to figure out what is that definition of success for them.
I think you're right, but just as a way of like playing devil's advocate as well, there's also studies that suggest that about 40 to 50% of high achieving students struggle on self-imposed pressure or perfectionism. Now, if I were to see success in, let's say, football, right? And I put my entire time into it, but it gets to the point where it's mentally exhausting, and I'm measuring success just because it's all I've ever known, and not because I generally see growth happening there. What would you suggest for those students to do? Because they've spent so much of their lives trying to be the best at what they're interested in that they haven't explored enough to see, oh wait, I could do this as well. Whereas there's the students that aren't great at school, but then they're finding success in something else, and they're like, okay, yeah, like you said, this is my form of success.
Yeah. So what I would say is that sometimes students can get really locked into like one definition of success. And then there can be like these kind of perfectionism kind of tendencies, and it can start to be kind of consuming. And I worry about those students because then they might be having more risk for symptoms of depression or symptoms of anxiety. And so with those students, what I would recommend is really seeing a counselor, really seeing somebody who can kind of help to maybe challenge some of those ideas about the perfectionism. And then there's very specific strategies that we can use. So for example, if students are having panic attacks and kind of like getting so locked into that definition of success that it's actually impairing their functioning, there are strategies we can use to help them to maybe have more realistic expectations, to maybe help to feel calmer, like there's, physiologically calmer. And when you feel physiologically calmer, then your brain, that frontal part of your brain, can work better. And so there's strategies that we can use for that. So for those students, then I'd recommend seeing a counselor for some help with that.
Yeah, and one of the other things that I work with students a lot is finding different pathways. Because high school it's but one step, and it's actually, in the grand scheme of things, one small step. When you think about that perspective, and that we have years of experience, and how many teenagers that we've seen go through this, and that there's always that conversation about, hey, if this isn't your path, we can find another door for you to go through. That's possible, and to try and open up those opportunities and bring those opportunities to students who just might have the blinders on. They might think this is the way it has to go, this is the way it has to be, I'm not good at this, now what am I going to do? Hey, you can come to us and we'll help you find that. We'll help you learn how to get around that, how to get where you want to go. Maybe it's not A to B, maybe it's A to Z and back to D and over to F, but we'll find you a way to get there. That's something that we can definitely support students with.
Well, like we can see, you guys are very forthcoming and quite approachable to talk to, right? And as most counselors are supposed to be. What would you think the student's perspective on you is? Because as a student currently, I think people often see counselors and doctors as an extreme measure to go to only when you've crossed that line of mental breakdown or something. And what do you think, what's a perspective you want to put into students' brains that makes them understand that this is not just for when everything's gone wrong and when you're just down rock bottom, that's the only time you should come. It's more of a place you can approach in general to see what possible options there are.
Yeah, that's a really important piece of what we work hard at in the school, is to normalize what we're here for, and to normalize that this is just like any other adult in school that you can come to. You might go to talk to your math teacher after class for some extra help with that. And if you're having difficulties with, mental health and well-being, if you're having questions about your higher education plans, we're the people that you come to. We go out into classes, we go out onto the campus, we do presentations, we host events, and we just try to make us be as visible as possible and as approachable as possible, I think, is how we try and manage that here and make it kind of like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna go have a chat with a counselor, and it's not anything bad or terrible, or maybe you have crossed the line, but you might know that this is the person that I go to, just like you might go to see the nurse, just like you might go to see one of the teachers or somebody else at school.
Yeah, I think it's about prevention too. You don't want it to get to that line where it's so severe that you're really having trouble functioning. So what I'll tell students a lot of times is that, if I, for example, I injured my ankle, and if I was walking around on it and it was 2 weeks and it's not getting better, it's actually getting worse and worse and worse, well then I'd go to the doctor and I would want to do something to intervene and to get some help with that. And so I tell students, if they're getting to 2 weeks and they're having trouble sleeping, they're feeling really stressed out, and they're, it's really interfering and they're not able to concentrate, well, that 2 week mark is kind of maybe their clue. Okay, maybe I should just go and have a chat. And it can be more about prevention, because if you get to 3 months and 4 months, it actually can get harder and harder to intervene. So earlier is better.
Right, I completely agree actually. But like I said, the one thing I've noticed in, maybe it's just our generation, and maybe it's just, I feel like it's an ongoing thing even. People think it's uncool to go to the counselor. like there's something fundamentally wrong with you if you go there, or like or they think, oh, my problem's too small, why would the counselor care? What is your perspective on this? Because I think it's really important for people to know that going to a counselor does not mean that things are wrong. It can also just mean that you're a bit lost and you need a bit of guidance, or just getting ahead. Like when you're mentally exhausted and you want to know what to do, you can go there.
Or just another perspective, just like somebody to kind of chat with and say, wait a minute, I'm seeing it this way, do you see it in a different way? And just getting a different perspective. And sometimes I think about it almost more like coaching. Like if you're maybe into sports and you're trying to sort of improve your game, well, seeing a coach is a pretty good idea. And it's the same with counseling that, okay, so I want to try and, figure out how to be the best version of myself and how do I do that? And so it's kind of almost more like coaching.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think it's about how else we're involved in schools. Like we're not just counselors, but speaking of coaching, I also happen to be a softball coach, so kids know me from there. I'm also one of the coordinators of our ambassador team, so kids know me from that. So just getting out and being that familiar face and being comfortable and being seen in the school can really help with that stereotype about, oh, you're going to the counselor, oh no, now you're in trouble, or things are really bad for you. And I think it also helps the more we work with kids, the more they talk about us, hopefully in a positive way. So they talk to their friends and they come back and they're like, oh, I went to see Dr. Goddard and she was so helpful. Next time you're having a problem, you should go and talk to her.
Sometimes they just want to come and hang out and play with my toys.
Right.
And my office. They just want like a place to just chill. That's okay. Yeah.
So if we make those connections with students on a day-to-day basis, then hopefully, kind of that word of mouth and that sense of, actually, it was really kind of helpful to go in and chat with Mr. Layman today. You should go see him. That's really nice.
Speaking of connections, actually, I feel like more so in the rest of high school, leaving that aside, especially in 11th and 12th grade, there's a lot of students that lock in, so to say, for their studies and everything. But in this, they tend to just isolate themselves from everything. Like they genuinely I have a couple of friends who, yes, they're doing really well in their studies, but they've completely isolated themselves from hanging out, from talking to friends, or even just meeting over the weekend. And this is like, they don't even spend lunch just having a fun conversation or anything. What is your perspective on them? Because I personally feel like it's really good that you're focused on your studies, but if you put aside a lot of things socially, sure, there's the thing like, okay, now you're just kind of socially outcasted, and like, well, teenagers will make sure to make you feel not included if they want to, but there's also the sense that eventually you are going to need social skills, and sure, you've been building them till 10th grade, but there's a lot to learn because, like you said, our brains are still developing in those 11th and 12th grades, and if you lose out on that when you go into college or something, you miss a lot of experiences that would be helpful in a newer environment.
Yeah, it makes me think, I'm a runner, and so I like to run long distances, like half marathon. And so when you're running like that, if you just run, and if you run every day, and all you do is run, and you do hard workouts day after day after day, actually, you're not going to be the best runner in the world. And so you really do have to take breaks. You have to sort of enjoy the scenery. It needs to be something that's fun, because otherwise you lose your joy from it. And so I think, it's kind of a metaphor then for life, is that what you're doing when you're going through high school and then maybe with your higher education opportunities and your career, it's a marathon. And so you have to enjoy the scenery along the way, and you have to, have breaks, and you have to take care of yourself. And so, so that's my thought on it. So,
great thoughts.
Yeah.
I wouldn't add anything to that. I mean, that's just like, that's such a great comparison. Students are going to plan their time and spend their energy doing what they want to do or what they think is important, but you just can't emphasize enough. Enjoy the scenery, take the breaks, come out of that room, go have dinner with a friend, play on your phone. You just can't simply be locked down and locked in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's just, that can do more harm than good ultimately. Give yourself a break. Give yourself the chance to have a little bit of fun and to enjoy.
And it's actually good for learning. There's just the neuroscience, because I like neuroscience, and so it's actually really good for learning. There's a lot of research about it that shows that when you get good sleep and you eat well and you socialize and you take breaks, the learning kind of like locks in a little bit more. It locks in better. Whereas if you're just studying, and you don't do that, you actually don't absorb as much. And so, yeah.
Going off a bit of a tangent here, there's normal students, there's average students, there's high achievers, there's people who aren't trying that much or have a different path that they want to go through. What do you think about parental pressure on them? Because I know from my side, or from friends that I know, that we do have different amounts of parental pressures on us. Like some parents are really like, okay, you need to do this for the next 6 months, like you have mocks and you have finals, just close your life down and focus on just staying in and not having those breaks and all that, and just focus in on getting the best grades you can, and then you can see if you want to chill afterwards. What are your perspectives on how parents shape, or parents put these sort of expectations onto their child, which stresses them even more and makes them feel like, okay, if I don't do this, my life is over, my parents are going to be disappointed in me, and it's just done.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard one because, parents, I mean, they can put, they have hopes and they have dreams for their children, and then maybe they do put pressure on their children. I think it starts from early years. You really, now I'm thinking as a parent, you want to help your children to develop skills across time. And then by the time they're 17, 18, heading into the end of their high school years and then heading towards higher education or university or career pathways, they're becoming young adults. And so at that point, you really want them to become more and more independent. And so I think that the parents, that can kind of take a step back a little bit and and allow their children to maybe make mistakes and start to learn how to have those adult skills. I think that those are the students that end up then being able to be successful because, they've been able to kind of learn the skills on their own. It's kind of like toddlers. Like you can't let, when they're toddling around, you can't protect them from every single fall. And they have to learn to walk. And so it's the same with teenagers. You have to let them, maybe have some guardrails, make sure they're safe, but let them make mistakes.
Yeah, I was going to say those guardrails are so important, those parent expectations, limits, consequences, behaviors, the things they're trying to develop in their kids. That's all an important part of growing up. And, as you were talking about earlier, how do you make that transition into college and university, and how is what you're doing in high school going to impact that? And your parents play a big role in shaping that. But I think where we come in is a bit of parent education, right? Talking to parents about exactly those things you were just saying. And we do a lot of reaching out to parents, we do a lot of presentations, we do a lot of workshops. You've done a few this year on the teenage brain and some of the other important topics for adolescents. And so in that sense, we kind of see ourselves as a partner. Like it's not just us and the students, it's us and the students and the parents, and having kind of that three-way conversation or that three-way dialogue, is that a word? But that three-way conversation about how can, we best support the student to get where it is they want to go. What can the parents be doing? What can the child be doing? And what can we be doing here at school to support them?
I think those are really good points actually, but what I've seen, and it may be like, this might just be specific cases or something, but there are a couple of students who are they love their parents so much that they don't want to be disappointed, of course, so they're afraid to have that conversation with their parents and be like, Mom, Dad, like maybe this course isn't for me, or maybe I want to pursue acting, or perhaps I want to pursue this science instead. And they're just afraid that saying anything other than what their parents expect of them would lead in just like disappointment, right? So what would you suggest parents can do to just have that conversation, or just make it open enough for their kids to feel, okay, I can talk to them about this and I can say what I really feel? Because naturally, like you said, it's a three-way trialogue. But
made a new word.
It's catching on now. It's a three-way journey, but just because respectively the parents are at a higher position of power, the students kind of let their parents take over a bit, and they don't really want to deviate from the path because they also could be thinking, okay, they're adults, they know better perhaps I should just listen to them, which, okay, to be fair, that's not really what teenagers think, but yeah, they have that perspective sometimes on a rare occasion. So what do you think parents can do to make it like a more healthier environment?
I think just listening, just listening to their child, their teenager, asking open-ended questions like what are your hopes for the future? What do you want out of, what is your definition of success? Like when you imagine yourself as a 30-year-old, what do you picture that to look like? So asking open-ended questions, actively listening, trying to build, because what's happening is that the parent is trying to build an adult relationship with their teenage student, because it's a transition. So now it's not so much parenting as it's going to be kind of more of an adult relationship. So I know for me, sometimes when I'm talking to my own son, I have to put in my mind, okay, I'm talking to my adult son, and he's an adult, he's making decisions, and he's kind of an adult in training. But I do try to remember that he does have to make his own decisions, and I have to respect that.
It's that challenge, I think, for parents to say to their kids, do what makes you happy. And if every parent lived by that and just said, do what makes you happy, can you imagine what a chaotic world we would have with all these kids eating Jell-O every day and, I don't know, never going to school? No, but I mean, parents want that for their children. Like, yes, do what makes you happy, but, right, there are some other limits that come along with that. Mm-hmm. And I've heard it time and time again in my office when working with students and parents, thinking about, okay, I know that this is not what the kid told me they wanted to do, but the parent is saying they want to go to medical school, and I'm like, no, they really don't. Like, that's the last thing they want to do, but they obviously haven't had that conversation, and trying to open up the door to that, and open up the door to saying, actually, in my conversations with your child, we've talked a lot about this and this and this and the other thing, and trying to partner with the student a little bit and trying to bring their concerns out when we can, in a comfortable environment, safe environment where we can do that and see what happens. But the other thing I would say for parents is, if you want your child to do what makes them happy, then find other ways to do that. Like if there are limits on where they can go to university or what you want them to study at university and you kind of don't see eye to eye, how else can your child get that experience? Maybe not through having a degree in that subject area, but you mentioned acting. Almost any university will have an acting club or a theater club or something like that. And how can you help your child find those opportunities that they can still do what they love and still follow an academic pathway that they're also interested in?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is an interesting topic to me, just because I think especially our grade has a lot of these sort of contradictions. Like they want to do this, but they're also doing this. So it's interesting for me to see. But I think at the end of it, it all sort of comes down to motivation. Like if you're working towards something, you're more motivated to get there and more motivated to be like, yes, you know what? This might not be exactly what I want, but there's opportunities for me to explore what I can do there. And for those that are less motivated, just because they're in a situation where they're just like, okay, I can't go here, I'm not getting to what I want to do, I should just sort of rebel almost. They know they should study, but they can't find the motivation in themselves to just do that. So what would you say is happening in their minds, from your perspective as well, when that happens, and how they can handle it better?
So in terms of motivation, I mean, none of us will always feel motivated. We're always going to have days when we're tired and maybe we don't feel, even if it's something we're interested in or passionate about. So that's where that kind of consistency can come in, and hopefully, what I try to work with students is developing those skills from the time that they're in 6th, 7th, 8th grade. And it's just even because it's sort of like the idea of running again. Even if you maybe say you just go out and you run 30 minutes a day or you run 5 minutes a day, that's better than nothing. And so what I would say to students is, even if you don't feel motivated, if you can just open up the computer and just do 10 minutes of studying, and that's okay, but it's just about consistency. If you can do something like that every day, then that beats motivation.
And again, this is through a lens of having worked with teenagers in career and higher education planning for the last 15 years, 20 years almost, is the unmotivated kid in high school can turn out to be the most successful person 10 years down the road. Like I can name you the names on, I won't do it, but I've got
Absolutely
perfect
true,
example, you know, of kids who are out there running companies, they're CEOs, you know, there's so much success out there, and just because they may not have been as motivated, as keen, as, you know, as much of a go-getter as their peers in high school, doesn't mean that that's how they're going to be for the rest of their lives, because that frontal cortex, by the time they're 25, that's going to be fully developed. They're going to have so many more skills, so many more abilities. They're going to be able to think in so many different directions and plan their lives the way they want it to be, you know. And it's really cool to have seen that over the last 15 years, and to know those success stories are out there absolutely for those kids that just weren't feeling it in high school, you know. It can happen.
And I've worked in university counseling centers in the past, and universities often preferred older students because they did have that time to mature, kind of figure themselves out, and then figure out, okay, what am I really passionate about? And then they turned out to be students that actually, even if it didn't matter about ability, you know, it wasn't about ability, it was students who were older actually turned out to be the ones who were able to be more successful in terms of getting good grades and graduating and things like that. So maturity is very important. I'll use my brother as an example. I can use my brother. My brother, you know, he was one of those students who was not motivated in high school, and kind of, you know, but bright and capable, but just not motivated. I think he made straight C's, and then I was like the studious one. And so then he ended up, he went to a school in Alabama, and he ended up graduating with a bachelor's degree, made straight C's again, and then he's extremely successful now, owns his own business, makes far more money than me. So I'm thinking, how did that happen? But you know, he's a great example of, you know, somebody who maybe he's not that traditional success, you know, straight A student. Really, he was not studious in the traditional sense, but he was really successful in the end because he followed his passion and he pursued what he wanted to do. So yeah.
See, that's the best part, because I feel a lot of people, as in high school, they just think, okay, if I don't do the exam, this is the end of my life. But it's so much important to get the perspective that there's so much more out of high school, and there's so much more of just life to live and explore, that like exams aren't everything, pretty much. It's a measurement of a sort of achievement that we have, but you can still find success in your own meaning, or in a broader like money meaning that many people are motivated with. Ooh, okay, well, let's just finish it off. Okay, just before we end, I would like both of you to individually answer if there's one thing you wish every student remembered during this exam period or from this podcast, and what would that be? That, like, sort of like a leaving message from you.
Enjoy the journey.
Do something fun, take a break, and don't chain yourself to that desk. Get out, see the sun, enjoy the fresh air, chat with a friend, just do something good for yourself.
Watch Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, right.
There's a lot of series, don't watch them all the same night.
Right, well, thank you guys very much. This has been wonderful.
Wow.
Thank you.